Hi, thank you for tuning in to the Finding Harmony podcast with me, your host, Harmony Slater. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony. I'm here with Russell Case.
Harmony.
Oh, hi.
We have a new sponsor for the show this week.
No, we don't.
We do. It's so exciting. We have so many Scandinavian listeners, as you know, in Sweden, especially.
And Norway.
Possibly some Norwegians.
I think so.
Well,
we're up there.
Vossevangen from Norway approached us about sponsoring the show this week.
What is that?
It's a Norwegian farmhouse ale. It's a traditional beer that's been brewed for centuries. It has a kind of a smoky character. It's a kind of brewing called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but maybe our guest today could help me.
Yeah,
Vossal. It's made with like an unsmoked malt and mainly flavored with juniper and kvek.
I don't know
which
where you
is
find these things.
which is a kind of yeast. And they sent us $25.
You're full of it. I want to see that $25.
I will show you the $25 after the show is over.
Well, our guest today speaks Norwegian.
Really?
Yeah, but
That's
she is
so
not
helpful.
Norwegian.
How do you pronounce Vossal or kvek? Do you know how to pronounce yeast in Norwegian?
Yeah, kvek.
Kvek?
How is it? Yeah, I think it's kvek.
Oh,
how is it spelled?
Kveik. Kvek. It's traditional yeast.
Yeah, it would be kvek.
Kvek, yeah.
Well, we all learned something today.
When you're brewing a malt ale, remember to always use kvek. For your
even though
Vossevangen needs.
Our beautiful guest today, who looks like an angel, Susan Klein-Holmen. She speaks Norwegian, lives in Norway, but you are a Midwesterner like us.
Are you one of these Midwestern Scandinavians?
No.
Yeah, actually my great-grandfather immigrated from Norway in the late 1800s. Yeah.
There was a famine.
In Norway?
Yeah.
In the Scandinavia country. My great-grandfather also emigrated from Sweden. He is a Svenska. He was the Lund people.
During the famine.
Yeah. And then it's a long story, but their progeny married into like this Jewish family, and it's all messed up now.
Okay.
So your grandfather was Norwegian, and then you went back to Norway.
Yeah, I went back to Norway when I was finished with graduate school in 2004. Mm.
Wow. Full circle.
Yeah.
You were studying architecture.
Yes, interior architecture.
Oh.
Yes, I love your titles. You are a interior architect.
Yes.
That's like, I feel like you're going to rearrange me interiorly, spiritually as well.
I like that.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this can go many directions. The interior architect outside as well as inside.
And it also says you're a spiritual emergence coach. And it made me wonder immediately if you knew the lady that came on the show, Dr. Emma Brogden.
Yes.
And then you did. It said later on in your bio that you did know Dr. Brogden.
Yes, I know her. She has. I've taken courses with her, and I've also worked with her personally through. Yeah, as I said, I've had class counseling with her. She's a psychologist as well. So she's great.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Well, we'll get into this.
I would like to. I've been thinking very seriously about taking her spiritual emergence coaching program.
Really? Are you going to?
I'm thinking very seriously about it.
You should do it.
I just feel like we have a lot on our plates at the moment, but I do think of, like, I would really like to do a course.
Yeah, spend a little less time in space, a little more time on the earth.
So, how long is the course?
Well, there's a theory part and a practicum part.
Mm-hmm.
The practicum is in person and the theory is online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it like all told like 10 years?
No.
Like
No.
6 months?
No, let's see. It wasn't that long because it's not coaching one-on-one, it's coaching peer support.
Mm-hmm.
So, so it went through the basics of what a spiritual emergence is and a spiritual emergency is, and the different types of experiences a person can have. And then also a practicum that was in London actually last September. I was there. It was amazing for a weekend. It was intensive. Yeah, it was great. Mm.
Okay, so for our listeners, what is the difference? Is there a difference between a spiritual emergence and a spiritual emergency?
Yeah, well, spiritual emergence is a spiritual
awakening
or an awakening. Yeah, I guess you could call it an awakening. And, it can happen spontaneously or it can happen during spiritual practices.
Mm-hmm.
And then a spiritual emergency is when through spiritual practices, a person becomes disoriented and confused.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes more of a crisis than a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling.
Right. Like spiritual awakening gone wrong.
Yeah.
I always used to say that to Jediah about the difference between the difference between normal people and superheroes is that normal people were just scientists and superheroes were always like humans that were doing a science experiment that went wrong.
Yeah. That's how we got the Fantastic.
Then they became super people.
Like the Fantastic Four. Yeah.
It's always science experiments gone wrong.
Peter
so
Parker.
So sort of like the spiritual emergence
they were all
gone wrong turns into a spiritual emergency.
I think you had a spiritual emergency.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And is that what brought you to Emma?
Exactly. Yeah. Because I was trying to integrate it, trying to figure out what actually happened. Yeah. It's
I can imagine it's very disorienting.
It's very disorienting, and it's also life transforming. So if a person has the right kind of support around them and is in a safe place, then it can be easier to integrate. When it happened to me, I wasn't in a safe place and I didn't have the right kind of support around me. And so I did a lot of reading and study about this area within spirituality. And because, I've been practicing yoga for a long period of time and was at a training where there was a lot of chanting, and I wasn't doing so much chanting before. And this kind of led me to feel a bit out of myself, like open. And it was quite nice. It was quite nice, actually. The moments that I was in this space. But because I wasn't in a safe place, it brought up some other things which were quite traumatizing.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I think these practices that we engage in as yoga practitioners, they have real power to them. And, maybe in sort of more ancient times, people would say they're mystical powers, or, we use the word spiritual also to describe sort of the undescribable sometimes, right? That relating to things that are ineffable or that we can't quite explain, but have a certain quality or a certain feeling to them. But even like they can be also explained scientifically, like, the repetition of a certain vibration or pattern, as far as like chanting goes, would change your brain waves, would, activate your vagus nerve, would create like an actual, this experience, potentially, maybe not in everyone, but potentially could like really move you into, what would you say, Russell? Like more of like a, maybe even between alpha and theta, like brainwave, like between sort of like a
you're looking for like
relaxation and dreaming kind of place.
You're looking
almost
for a theta or a gamma wave reaction where you kind of you feel like you understand more than you feel suddenly like you have a kind of more unified understanding of reality.
Yeah, so it's like transcendental. I think transcendental is a great word for it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good word for it.
Well, maybe we could set this up. You mentioned chanting, and I just kind of want to start at the beginning in a kind of more linear way.
He loves linear.
Yeah.
You grew up, I think, in a home filled with music and church-going folk. And I wonder if you could describe that, because that starting there in the Midwest and with very nice parents, unlike mine, if you're listening, and then I think that your story is super interesting, and it goes to this event in a kind of almost a straight line, really.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I never thought about it as a straight line. But yeah, I was raised Catholic, Roman Catholic. I grew up moving around a lot, and but my mother, in the Midwest, as you know, there's well, as you know, or you may not know, but where I came from, there was in these small communities in North Dakota, like people that went to the Lutheran church and people that went to the Catholic church.
Right.
And so in my parents' generation, a Catholic and a Lutheran could not get married.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
For obvious
so
reasons.
Then, yeah. And so my mother, who was raised Lutheran, when she met my dad in college, in the marching band drumming, she fell in love, and in order, she was highly persuaded to become Catholic.
Yeah, convert, which is sort of weird when you're already Christian.
Right?
Yeah, but yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We were Lutheran, by the way.
You were?
Yeah, Swedish Lutheran. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So
she converts.
She converted, yeah. And she was very dedicated. And, we went to Catholic school, and she became a Catholic teacher. She was a teacher. She worked in the Catholic school system. And I went to church, like Mass. It was called Mass. I went to Mass from, every morning before school, because I went to a Catholic school for half an hour. And then we went to Mass on Sunday.
Yeah.
And that was just normal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was lovely. I liked a lot of aspects of it. I didn't know anything different until I became older, but I liked I liked peace be with you, the shaking of the hands. Yeah. I loved that. I also really liked the singing, the community and the singing together. And I liked the rituals in Catholicism. I like them. And I think that's one of the things that I really like about yoga too, is the rituals in yoga. So yeah. And as I think I wrote this in my bio, but there was one time when I was in second grade, we had this I can't remember what it's called now, but it's the anointing of the sick. It's like a ritual, or
like the
a
anointing of the sick or something, and you bring the sick people up and they bless them and put the holy water on them, or the oil, or
exactly. Yeah. And I went up because I had a really stiff neck, and like I couldn't, I don't know why it was stiff, but I decided that I was going to go up, and then the priest took these candles, and crossed them around my neck and then blessed me. And it was such a interesting experience, because the next day, and maybe it's, you can read so much into it if you want to, but I didn't have a stiff neck anymore. And it was for me, when I look back at it now as an adult and thinking about like experiences that are undescribable or out of the ordinary, or I would consider that as one of those experiences. And at the time, I didn't really think anything of it, but I just think it's interesting to
Yeah,
look
and
back at those things.
I think those things also inform like the other things we get interested in too when you have an experience like that, even if you're not thinking about it so much, but like it gives you a deep belief or a deep sense of that there's maybe like some mystical energy or power in the universe that you got
Yeah,
connected to in a way, right?
yeah, definitely. And more with working like doing the spiritual emergence coach training, and Emma talked a bit about Spiritism, which is these psychiatric wards in Brazil where they don't
Right.
use medication and they use hands-on healing. And I I find it so fascinating, and so I'm curious about it. Um, people are healed like from mental health problems like
Yeah.
schizophrenia, and it's interesting. I find it really fascinating.
Yeah.
I've seen that kind of work within the transpersonal circles as well, where long-term chronic pain can be healed through um, self-talk, positive self-talk. It's it happened to me, so it's
Okay.
entirely convincing.
Yeah. What happened?
Uh, I
Can I
had
ask?
you can. It's all about you though, and my listeners have had enough of me. Um, I had piriformis syndrome from which was a sciatic symptom from a couple of herniated discs, and I was kind of struggling. And I just went to a workshop at Emma's Dr. Brogdon's school, Sophia University, which was formerly ITP, the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology in the South Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And the founder there, I forget his name off the top of my head, um, but the founder there was running a workshop on chronic pain, alleviating it with positive self-imaging. And I was just sitting in the chair, you know, I was there kind of just as a friend. I was just like, yeah, I'll come, whatever. And I had this pain in my piriformis in the hip socket, and they asked us to describe it in your mind. And I said, oh well, yeah, I've had this for a year. It feels like a Rottweiler chewing on my ass. That's how it
Mm.
feels.
Yeah.
I said, okay, so now imagine what you would do to alleviate that. So if you had described it as shattered glass, imagine the glass melting, like that kind of thing. It's like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So incidentally, I had kind of gone into a kind of soft,
Like trance state, like a little
how
self
did
hypnosis.
how I had put myself in I can tell the story, but I went into a self-hypnotic state by just staring at a single point, concentrating on that point as we're trained to in yoga,
Mm-hmm.
and concentrating on the feeling. And then in that self-hypnotic hypnosis, I just started petting the head of the Rottweiler. And the piriformis all at once unlocked, and there was a kathunk in my hip that I could physically feel, a thunk, and it released.
Wow.
I was like,
Wow.
and I just sat there like, this is interesting. And I didn't say anything about it and talk about it. I just like, I don't know what just happened, but something big happened. And walked out, got in the car, drove home, and I was just kind of like waiting for the pain to happen because sitting in a chair, made it worse because of the herniation.
Mm.
And then it never came back.
Wow.
It's been 12 years. I was
Mm.
like,
The mind-body connection. It's
yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, exactly. So I was thinking about I was thinking about that in particular about what happened to you with your priest.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing something that's extraordinary, out of out of the ordinary. You're walking up to the front of the church as a second grader, and he's, doing this public thing to you that's extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And your body responded to the phenomenological experience. And and that's amazing.
It is. I think so too.
And so how do you go from being a kind of devout Catholic, a nice girl, to being a kind of more demonic yoga student?
Let's see how. I guess when I, moved, or it was right around, I guess I was 16. When I was a teenager, right? There's this, I don't know if I should say this, but hopefully my mom and dad won't be listening, but, but about, it's common and normal to want to explore sexuality, right?
Yeah.
And so
your parents aren't going to want to know about this.
No.
Trigger warning for Susan's parents.
For Susan's parents.
It's the whole, don't have sex before you're married. If you do, you're a sinner. You're going to go to hell. That whole thing, it had a huge psychological impact on me.
Yeah.
And which I don't think that's exactly what it means. I think that people interpret things the way that they want to become moralistic. I don't really think that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the way that I just started to see things like, with homosexuality, and I have, family members who are homosexuals, and the closed-mindedness and this focus on this traditional family, and women's rights, women can't be priests, why, also like, the women's choice over their own bodies, abortion, why, it just, we should be able to be our own agent, have own personal agency, and not be moralized for living our lives. I don't think that that's what life is all about. I think it's about finding acceptance, and finding acceptance within oneself, and finding acceptance and being accepting to others. So
yeah,
and I also, at that point in time when I graduated from high school, I moved. It was a small community, and I moved and went to university, and my, things started opening up for me in university, like women's spirituality, feminism, meditation. I went to a meditation retreat. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I was super curious.
Yeah.
It was a silent retreat for 4 days, and I was 21, and I had never been silent for that long.
Yeah. Yeah, what kind of meditation was it?
It was Vipassana, right?
It was Vipassana, standing meditation, walking meditation, eating meditation, sitting meditation. And then we could talk when we had a meeting with the person who was leading it. And then the teacher, and we then could talk about our experience. And I was so young at the time, I didn't really understand. We talked about the experience in pairs. So my another woman and I went into this room and to talk to the teacher, and this teacher was older than me. She was an experienced woman, and I was like a young woman, and she was talking about things that I couldn't understand, demons and things, but now I can see more about. She was talking about her inner demons, but at that time I was taking everything so literal. I didn't understand,
Wow.
You're like, what? You're possessed? You're like, oh dear.
Yeah. I
You
learned
need an
about
exorcism.
I learned about inner demons in the Midwest. Yeah, I know about this. Yeah.
You know about them, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Did we
It was very
gloss over
interesting.
the teenage sex bit? Did we do that? And we just kind
No.
of moved right on,
Yeah,
right
but
past
that
it?
got her questioning. We all understand.
Because I
We've all
thought
been there, I
we
think, in
put
the
the
Midwest growing up.
trigger warning out there, but then we didn't actually
We didn't actually pull the trigger.
We didn't pull the trigger. Yeah. All right.
But yeah, no, I think that's so interesting. So, did you enjoy the meditation retreat? Like, how did you come out of that?
There were parts of it that I really enjoyed,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really challenging to not talk. Like I remember, but I stayed with it, and I was curious, and I
Yeah.
wanted to see what it was all about. But I remember afterwards sitting in the car, and I turned the radio on as high as I could, and I just started like singing as loud as I could,
Yeah.
just because I wasn't used to hearing my own voice. It was like so interesting,
Yeah.
and I've been curious about these longer vipassanas because since that I hadn't really done much meditation until
Yeah.
recently. But I mean, in like years ago, I was thinking, I was talking to a friend who's a yoga teacher who does the vipassana quite frequently, and I was thinking, well, I wonder curious as to what that's about, but maybe that will come for me at some time.
Yeah,
maybe.
when the kids are a little older.
Yeah, but it's
I have
just
3 of them.
I know, you gotta wait a little.
It's
Yeah.
just simply the best vacation you'll ever have.
Is
as
it?
As long as you can sit comfortably,
Yeah.
And your hips are solid and your back is solid from your asana practice.
Yeah.
It's so gorgeous. It takes years. Like you de-age. You come out of
Wow.
it like you've given yourself another 5 years of life.
People call it like the Vipassana glow.
It's so
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like because
it's
when
like
you're
a
on
complete
vacation,
distressing though. It's like really a complete distressing in the sense that you're not feeding your senses with any kind of stimulus.
If you go to Maui for vacation, you're going to come back stressed out
or looking older.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
You're going to be more stressed than when you entered. And if you go into Vipassana, that's not going to happen. There is so little stressors that you really do decompress in a way that we don't really understand, like what a vacation's for in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Staycations are probably the best, but if you have 3 kids, that's not a vacation either.
No.
Yeah, I'll have to try it sometime.
Yeah, you'd
I'd
enjoy
like
it,
to.
I think.
I think I would really enjoy it.
It's your jam.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So then you're in university, you're experimenting with different types of spiritual practices.
All kinds of stuff she's experimenting with.
Yeah. And what was your degree in before you did your master's in inner architecture?
Yeah, I like that harmony. I double majored in psychology and Norwegian studies.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah,
in North Dakota.
Yeah, at the University of North Dakota. It's one of the few universities that has a Norwegian studies major.
That's so interesting that was even like something that was drawing you.
A lot of Norwegians there.
Then. I guess, yeah, but still, she could have chosen anything.
Yeah, I could have. And actually, it was my friend who had just come back from a summer study in Norway where she was learning the language. And then she said, Susan, it would be great if you started studying Norwegian with me. And and at that time I was like,
why not?
I was also sure, why not? But I was at a period of time where my grandfather got really ill, my mom's dad, and he only spoke Norwegian until he was 9 years old.
Oh,
and
wow.
he learned English when he was 9. And so the Norwegian culture and language growing up for me on my mom's side has always been really important and celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
And like lutefisk, like very traditional Norwegian. People don't really eat lutefisk. We don't eat lutefisk here for Christmas dinner. But in the United States, when I was a child, that's what my grandfather and my grandmother wanted to eat for Christmas dinner.
You said Ludovix?
Lutefisk.
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 I don't think that's what she said.
Yeah,
Lutefisk.
Lutefisk.
Lutefisk. And when you're having
What is this,
lutefisk,
though?
make sure to crack open an ice cold Vasavangen beer. Vasavangen beer is the beer of choice in Norway and can be for your Norwegian special
Christmas
meals
dinner.
as well. Now, back to the show.
What is that for those of us who have no idea?
Lutefisk.
Well, it's a way, it's cod, and it's a way that cod was preserved. It was soaked in lute and dried.
Lutefisk.
Is lute like a salt?
Lute.
It is, what is it? It is, it is a salty, like, soapy, I don't know. I would have to look it up. I can't remember exactly what it is.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of toxic, actually.
Oh.
My grandmother often fed me soap as a child.
Seems that way, anyway.
She was the Swedish one, so it makes sense to me.
Oh yeah.
So it's like maybe like some kind of fermentation process, a little bit.
It cleans the inside of the mouth of demonic influence, is what she told me.
That's so interesting.
It preserves the fish because in the years ago, they had to preserve it, and it was well, now it's a delicacy in Norway.
Right.
Yeah, people go and eat it at fancy restaurants.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It is.
I just learned something totally brand new today.
Wow.
All right, so back to university
and you're having
psychology, which is interesting also because that's also what you're currently kind of interested in pursuing as well.
There's a straight line for her.
There is.
And are you having more spiritual emergence situations or Kundalini experiences? Are there more things kind of happening?
Very seldom, like any type of Kundalini experience, no. But are you meaning like as growing up, or?
I mean, what I'm referring to is when you went to your first Ashtanga yoga class and your husband said, "You're a different person now."
Yeah. Well, he's talking about coming out of a Vipassana.
Yeah.
After one yoga practice in Ashtanga yoga, I felt like a different person. I felt new. I felt like I was on vacation just for that hour and a half. And I came home and he was like, "Oh, where were you?" And I said, "I was at a yoga class." And he's like, "Wow, you look so like fresh, like yeah."
He could see it on you.
New person. Yeah, he could see it on me. Yeah.
Wow.
And I could feel it in me. I just felt so open in my joints and my body. It was amazing. That was in graduate school.
And he's Norwegian.
Yeah, he's Norwegian.
And were you in Oregon when you met, or did you meet in North Dakota?
We met in North Dakota.
Oh, you did, and then you moved out to Oregon together.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's nice of him. Oh.
You guys have been together a long time then.
We've been together a long time, since 1995.
Wow. Congratulations.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How old are you?
I told you she looks like
she looks like about 23 is where I'm going to place her. What were you, born in 1975 or something like crazy like that?
74.
You're older than me, and you look 20.
That's all the meditation and the spiritual.
I'm sorry. I'm going to use some salty language.
Emergence.
There's a trigger warning, but that's fucked up. I don't know what's going on.
Spiritual emergence
over there.
That happened.
But stay out if you're at home.
All the Ashtanga yoga practice.
Moving to Norway and staying out of the sun 8 months of the year is probably helpful.
Maybe. Maybe a little bit of that too.
Yeah, maybe. Staying out of the sun for sure.
And the fresh air. You live in the countryside, right? In Norway?
I live outside of a smaller community in like a suburb, which is near the ocean, and yeah, around, like, we have a nature trail in our backyard. But it's a neighborhood.
Yeah.
We live in an
Yeah.
Arctic desert.
I know.
The tundra.
Yes.
I know what that's like.
Yeah.
I've
Yes,
lived
you
there
do.
too.
Yes, you do. You know what it's like.
North Dakota is balmy. It's so warm. It is so warm down there. When I visited, I was like, man, take my jacket
I think
off
it's very
in
similar.
January, flying from Calgary. I was like, this is.
Are you sure it was North Dakota?
I think it's
Yeah,
a similar weather to here.
I have taught yoga to school teachers in North Dakota, and it was so pleasant.
You're so silly. Now, there's times though. It just depends on the weather pattern. Sometimes we are warmer than like Chicago.
Oh yeah.
So it just depends on
Chicago is different.
that Arctic
front. Yes, which way the wind blows.
Yeah, exactly. And how many trees you have around you.
That's right. And if you're near the lake or not.
Used to dream about trees.
Right.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
So you start taking yoga in university, and then what happens when you move back to, for the first time, Norway? You get your master's in interior design.
I heard that was like a crisis moving to Norway.
It was challenging, yeah. Moving cultures is challenging, uprooting, and it kind of, it's hard. It's hard.
Did you have kids when you moved, or was it just the two of you?
No, it was just the two of us. And I had been to Norway many times as a tourist and visitor, but you don't get the inside of the culture. I mean, it's a lovely culture, don't get me wrong, but there are differences for sure with American culture and Norwegian culture that you really don't experience when you're just there for a short period of time, and you're going to be leaving in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I made a note about this on your bio. I was thinking about the differences between us as well as commonalities, which is, I think, how we make the podcast is kind of commenting on these. And we moved constantly. We moved every 6 months to a year.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking about the constancy of your childhood of staying in one place and being connected and having these deep roots, much in the way that Harmony does. And for me, I was constantly the foreigner in a strange land. Even like moving from one small town in Illinois to another, they treat you like you're a demonic foreigner. And so going to a place like Korea or India or England, I'm used to being the foreigner, and I'm used to experiencing what do they call that? Culture shock.
Or at least feeling like an outsider, maybe.
I am the outsider, and that's how I define myself. So going to Norway for you, it must be kind of shocking, because you kind of think, well, I'm going to my homeland, I'm going home, but then you're confronted with this enormous difference.
Yeah, I think it's just the small things in the beginning when you move to another culture, and learn the language. Even though I had a major in Norwegian language, I could understand it, and I could read it, and I could listen to it, but then being part of a conversation and speaking it and being part of like a conversation was challenging, because it took a long time before I could even say what I wanted to say before the topic was moved on to another topic, because, and also I was kind of hard on myself. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to speak Norwegian like a Norwegian, and I really wanted to just fit in, and that didn't serve me very well. So there were a couple of times where I just decided that, you know what, I'm not Norwegian. It's part of my bloodline and history and family heritage, but I'm American living in Norway.
Right.
And that's okay. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Wow.
Take some of the pressure off a little bit.
That's such a fascinating point, because it's really the thing that I struggle with, is the innate desire to be a chameleon in a new place so that I don't stick out and get hit.
Mm-hmm.
But really just being yourself is so much more freeing or authentic. But I'm in constant conflict, because I hear it in every conversation. I just like, oh, I'm just trying to sound like the person I'm with, and it's not me. But then who are we?
That's an interesting conversation topic.
There is no you.
Yeah, well, it really comes down to identity, and having having a real relationship to the other or the. So what do you do when you're trying to discover your identity and who you actually are and what you actually are in a spiritually emergent situation?
Wow.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. You know what really was healing for me was grounding types of activity, like walking barefoot in the grass. Also, listening to like the healing arts, like music, visual arts, painting, writing, just writing with free thought, just writing, drawing, and listening to music that I hadn't listened to for a long period of time, like Lilith, the Lilith Fair. Do you remember that?
Sure.
With Sarah McLachlan, our Canadian hero.
Yes. So I started listening to music, like female voices that were really empowering, and that brought me to a really, a place in my life where I had a lot of memories and good memories, and I think music brings us to different places in our lives and can be really healing. And reading a lot.
It's interesting, like this idea, because I think this can happen. I mean, we're kind of focusing on this spiritually emergent awakening, or like a Kundalini awakening or spiritual experience, but I think this can also happen for people, like anytime there's a loss of identity or history, or like a break,
like becoming a mom.
Yeah, becoming a mom, where it's like, I mean, for me that's like a very spiritual experience, and like is kind of a spiritual emergency at times. Can be spiritually emergent or a spiritual emergency, right?
Yeah, who are you at that point?
And so there's like these breaks in our psyche, or getting divorced, or the death of a loved one or family member, or changing career, losing a job, those types of like small deaths.
The death of a yoga practice.
Of our personality, right? What we've identified with is me, my, and I, and a part of ourselves, and then it gets taken away, or we lose it somehow, or we let go of it, or try to let go of it, or are forced to let go of it. And then how do you find yourself again? How do you integrate who you're becoming, or who you're stepping into, or what's awakening within you with this past identity, or with this gap of, I don't know who I am anymore. I think those tools really work well for those types of things too. It doesn't have to necessarily be a huge spiritual awakening that we're talking about. I think these are very common experiences that everyone has at some stage in their life, whether it's mystical or not. It's just like an abyss, or a space of feeling like they don't know who they are anymore, and who am I, and what does this all mean? An existential crisis maybe.
I agree, exactly.
So I think those tools are really helpful and powerful ways to kind of connect back to yourself, like you're saying, like grounding things, connecting to the senses, the writing, the looking at art, music, like just integrating back into an identity in a way.
Yeah, I also took horse riding lessons
Oh,
because I used to
cool.
ride horse when I was a teenager
Oh,
and child,
amazing.
actually. So that was also really riding horse is really
Yeah.
grounding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Beautiful.
I was thinking on this kind um, of the conversation that we had with Emma and Dr. Brogdon, and the kind of panicked emergency that I was having when I was a young person, and thinking about, like you said, what helped and what was working. I kind of I stopped trying to have like new relationships. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of a bit of a social butterfly and hooking up a lot, and meeting people, but I kind of just like pulled back from that. I did a manual labor job that I really liked, and it just it felt very kind of grounding just to use my hands doing stuff.
Yeah.
And then I would still have kind of I would have panic attacks when I would fall asleep every night, because it was always kind of right there, the kind of psychic break I was having. And then I found myself doing breathing exercises kind of
Mm.
intuitively, and that was extraordinary to, for months on end, just every night having to do a kind of made up pranayama practice to get myself to calm so that I could sleep. And it became a kind of habit that when I would start to panic in any moment or in any situation, just to remember to, okay, breathe. You're kind of getting a little unsettled.
Mm-hmm.
And I even saw that once in the Ashtanga yoga teacher Richard Freeman. I saw him kind of pick up his energy a little bit and then immediately bring himself down with his breath and bring his voice back down. I was like, oh yeah, I recognize that. That's, yeah, the you're getting a little untethered, and so you pull yourself back with some kind of grounding exercise, as you said. And it's interesting that all of your grounding exercises seem tied to a kind of idyllic youth
Mm.
that you had.
I tied them to creativity, so it's maybe
Interesting.
your idyllic youth is very creative.
Yeah, but the horseback riding, the things that she used to do as a child.
Yeah, but maybe it's about connecting back into the things that used to bring you joy more than, I mean,
We're asking her.
I know, but I'm just
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it was, definitely connecting back into the things that bring me joy, like Harmony said. Um, Connecting back into um, the feeling, the vibration, I think, of the groundedness, because all of those things that I just intuitively was drawn to, I were really, really helpful. And then when I learned about more of this, studying with Dr. Bragdon and studying with Bonnie Greenwell about the different ways that we can ground when our energy is in this, uh, bioenergy release, then I read that these are things that are very, very helpful. So I, I think that's so interesting how if we just, I'd listened to what I needed, and then I did what I needed, and I was in a space where I could do that and take care of myself. And yeah,
and they were naturally the things that were helpful also. So
yeah,
yeah, that's beautiful. Like I think I often I agree with that when we tune in, and if you're really like listening, like what do I need now,
mm-hmm.
and you can be in that open space and just really like listen and then respond, I think that inner knowing is always trying to guide us back to
Mm-hmm.
wholeness and back to balance and back to integration.
Yeah, definitely. I also thought it was interesting because my yoga practice changed around that time, from this like really wanting, really like this wanting to perfect asana, to just letting that go and releasing these ideas that somehow got into my head about what an Ashtanga practice is. Like, so my Ashtanga practice is very different. I still do the series, but I don't perhaps do the vinyasa, and maybe I don't do the whole series. Like maybe I do. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate from the two of you that you talk about in the podcast, because it's really refreshing to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I feel like with Ashtanga practitioners in particular, it's a heavy weight that we seem to bear and carry,
put on ourselves.
Yeah, this expectation. And I think it brings a lot of baggage with it, of perfectionism, of achievement, of success driven, of being loved and accepted and appreciated for our skills or our abilities, or, it's, I think it comes from a deep wound, and unfortunately, I don't think the practice addresses this wound. I think it just puts a band. Yeah, it either exacerbates it or it puts a Band-Aid over it for a while.
As Richard says, it's the perfect vehicle for a perfectionist to practice masochism.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And I think that sometimes it does take those spiritual emergencies or other types of emergencies to really like go into the deeper wound and go into that deeper space within yourself that needs the healing. And that might involve letting go of the practice for some time, or it might involve releasing the attachment to asanas, and also looking at what we were using the asana practice for.
Yeah.
And so I'm yeah, it's not easy, and it's painful often, but sometimes it's exactly the medicine we need, right? And I appreciate that you say that, because I think the Ashtanga practice can be healing, but I think it can also be used in a way that gives us a false sense of being healed.
That's well put. I wonder if I could ask you to kind of set this up without like using proper names or anything like that.
Yeah.
You're living in Norway. You have 3 children and a happy husband, and you decide, I think, to go on a trip to do a yoga course. And was it in India? Was it in Europe? I'm not sure.
It was in Europe.
Okay, it was in Europe. And so you go to Europe to do this yoga course, and you're there and you're doing a lot of chanting, which is musical and shouldn't be so different for you. And it's all day chanting. And then you started to say you felt a kind of outside of yourself kind of experience. I wonder if you could describe that a bit more.
Yeah, I can. I started to feel like, I remember just switching from one activity to the next. I started to feel a bit disoriented, to like, oh, we're not going to do that now. Like, I thought we were going to do the yoga practice. And then that's when I started to really, I felt a shift inside of me. And then I also started to feel this energy, this uncomfortableness in my pelvis area, and in my, it's just like this churning of something in the lower chakras, the Muladhara chakra and the Svadhisthana chakra. And then I also, everything just seemed so heightened. Like my senses were heightened, colors were brighter, tastes were brighter, or tastier, or I started to see that, or metaphors and symbols starting to make more meaning. and I thought that was kind of interesting. And yeah.
And then you also said at the time that you I think you felt, and you said this in your bio, forgive me,
Mm-hmm.
that even though you were married and had children and should have been, I think, I don't remember the word you used, but safe, you started to feel that the teacher there was creating an unsafe situation for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, were you being, physically harassed? Is that what you mean?
No, it was not physical. It was psychological. It was gaslighting and
Mm.
seduction and manipulation.
Mm.
Um, and the teacher wanting to be near me, or to be inviting me to, making me feel special, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And so my family was with me it was a 2-week training. My family was with me the first week, and then they left, and then I felt extremely vulnerable because I
Yeah.
didn't have my anchor with me anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I started to really understand what was going on then, and then I
Yeah.
decided that I had to leave. And at that time that I left the training early. That I was already in a state of I panicked because
Yeah.
I
Right.
realized I felt I wasn't safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
you're kind of
Wow.
in a paranoid state, though just because you're paranoid doesn't mean you're not being harassed, and but you're in a kind of paranoid panic state, and now you're having to travel to get home, and then you get home and you're still in this kind of state a little bit, and your family's noticing that you're not quite right. Is that what you said?
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm very familiar with this sensation. Like
Are you?
I've had this situation where I've gone back home and nobody knows what's wrong with me and I'm trying to hide it. But people are like, you don't seem right. Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. That's something very, very familiar to me.
Yeah.
And so how are you managing these interactions with children and your husband? Are you trying to talk about it? Or are you just trying to hide it? What are you doing now?
I I wasn't myself. So my husband was trying to moderate the situation and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So yeah, I couldn't hide it because I wasn't myself.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what to say. I don't know how to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for the average person, it would sound like I flipped it, but
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
Like you flipped it.
Yeah.
but
Was it like more ecstatic, or was it more like depressive? Because I think it
it
can
was
kind of go both
alternating
ways, right?
back and forth. It was
Okay.
alternating back and forth,
Yeah.
Ooh.
experiencing um, this feeling of oneness and connection, and then feeling afraid and fearful. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
normally you would have like a guru or a spiritual guide, walking you through and keeping you safe in this experience. But that was
mm,
absentee.
mhm.
And so for how long were you in this kind of
In between
in
state.
between state, um, before you got help and found a way out?
For a long time, actually. For the most intense part was, maybe 3 weeks, and then things started to settle down. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
also a very, you know, from what I've studied and learned about the chakras and the psyche, and when there's a release of energy, and there's a clearing with blockages in these psychic centers in the body, and particularly a lot of people have a lot of blockages in their lower chakras,
Yeah.
and it could be trauma, sexual trauma. It could be feeling of not being safe, that, all of this stuff comes up. So all of this stuff started to come up like a video in front of me, like of all of in a linear way of experiences that I had now in this life. And if a person believes in past lives, like I do, things that maybe happened in a past life, I think so. It was a lot of trauma that was coming up, a lot of things that that I had, not processed, that I thought I had processed in my mind, in my head, psychologically, but it was stored in the body. And this goes back too to like the body-mind connection. Like, I think I truly believe that because I had this experience, so I use myself as a guinea pig, that the trauma and all of our experiences are they get connected or stuck in the body. And if we're not moving the body, which yoga does, it opens everything up, it releases things. The chanting does, the vibration, changing the vibration, the emotion, the pranayama, meditation, all of this opens up the body energetically in a very subtle way,
Yeah.
And if a person, and I don't know, when this was never talked about in the teacher trainings that I had, and I wish that it was, I wish that I would have known about this stuff. And but maybe it's not talked about because it would scare people. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Then who? But what yoga teacher knows what to do with it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's also something that as yoga teachers, we're not really trained to facilitate, a trauma-informed space or even an emergent space, or we're not trained to even identify the difference between what might be trauma versus what is somebody just releasing emotion, right? These are kind of subtle differences that unless you do training outside of your standard yoga teacher training, you're maybe not gonna understand as a teacher or even be aware of. And like you say, it's kind of important because we are doing practices and using tools and techniques that are changing our nervous system, that are releasing energy, that are opening energetic channels in the body, that are all also related to our psyche and our mind. And it's kind of an important aspect of the yoga practice that, I mean, maybe that is why, there is kind of a little bit of a danger in a way to playing with these practices in the ways that we do, because it's, you really do need to be in a place that feels safe and held to have these releases and these openings and be able to integrate them, as you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a couple of different guys in the States, like Keith Raniere or Andrew Cohen, guys who themselves, are just creating sociopaths who are creating Kundalini experiences for others, and then like sharks diving in and taking advantage of the people who have them. And it's just so frightening thinking about how vulnerable we are in these situations and how ill-equipped we are for managing people who are having them. And that's why that conversation with Dr. Brogdon was so revelatory, is that there's like a whole culture of support in Brazil. Forgive me for saying this is really racist, of all places. It's like Brazil, of all places, has
it could have been anywhere. You would have said that.
No, I mean, like Brazil, and like, carnival and spiritual emergence.
Well,
is like,
it makes sense. They're like connected deeply to spiritual realms.
Catholicism, and it's like, and yet there are structures in place for learning how to manage it. I just think it's incredible, and I'm still fascinated by the training, and it really is amazing. I just wanted to say that as an aside, just how, but bringing it back to you, you're now deeply passionate about doing this kind of work, being a spiritual emergence coach, but you're also an architect. You've created a yoga school. You have an online business, I think. You've got 3 kids
and 3 children
and
a husband.
And a husband, yeah.
You describe yourself as a multi-passionate entrepreneur. And after what happened to me, all I wanted to do was go into a cave and just be alone and just paint and do yoga and keep people away from me. It's amazing to me how high functioning you are.
She integrated.
You integrated.
She's the example of the work.
I still don't like talking to people.
I was in a cave for a while. Yeah. And I'm very, I'm doing all these things, but none of it's, except for my interior architecture business, is full time at the moment.
Mm.
So it kind of goes in kind of waves, I guess. But I do have to take care of myself. Otherwise, I can feel when I don't. I can feel it in my body. Like if I'm not doing, the best day for me is set up if I get up at 5 o'clock. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect and I do this every single day of the week, but I'm just saying that if I really want to have the best day, then I get up at 5 o'clock and I meditate and I do yoga practice and I do some pranayama and I have that time for myself. I carve it out for myself. And then, in the school year, then I'm good. I'm good. Like I'm good. Like I'm good inside myself. Like I'm pretty good. But when I don't do that, I don't feel, I feel off. And and then I get stuck in my head, the mind chatter gets stronger if I'm not centered in my body. Maybe you can relate. I don't know, but
if I don't wake up at 8 o'clock, then I don't feel right in my body or my mind.
Yeah.
No.
After waking up at 2:30 in the morning for like 15 years, I was 20 years, whatever it was.
Wow.
30 years of Ashtanga yoga.
You decided to sleep now.
But like 15, at least a good solid 15 of it was 2:30 in the morning.
You're catching up.
Like now, like 8 o'clock,
wow.
It just feels so right.
Yeah, you deserve that, Russell.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Enjoy.
you for that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate feeling, what do you call,
recognize?
Recognized. Yeah, that's nice.
Affirmed.
That's what I was looking at. I really feel the affirmation. That's great. But I hear you say this all the time. It's like, I've got to get up. It's 5 o'clock. My whole day is fucked if I don't get up at 5 a.m. And it's like, don't wake me up on the way out.
I agree. I definitely, those days when I have that time for myself are definitely the best days. It's funny though, because I feel like I want about 4 or 5 hours of time to myself. So it's a real dilemma.
I can relate.
I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this?
How did the two of you meet? Well, by the way, we
first
both
met when you came into B school. You were an interior architect, and then you joined B school to I think enhance. You also had your yoga school at the time, but you wanted to increase the offerings and change the offerings, and it was during COVID too, so everything was going online as well, right?
That's right.
I thought Susan was like your yoga student or something.
Well, we've also worked together in a yoga capacity as well.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that experience like for you? What was the transformation that happened when you came into B school and left B school or continued working the B school path?
Yeah, I've taken it many times because once you're a lifetime member,
Yeah, you get it
so
for life, which is amazing.
yeah,
I love
which
that
is
too.
amazing.
Mhm.
But the mentoring, the master class, you had a master
Yeah.
class,
Yeah.
and um, because I've been following your yoga path, and you've been a
Yeah.
really big inspiration in my life, I thought, oh, I want to do this,
Yeah.
with you. And so I did this because I also wanted to, increase online offerings and get things going. I'm still
Yeah.
working on it, but I thought that it was really educational. I learned a lot
Yeah.
through the whole B school, and then also being in the mastermind group with you was great because it was a really good networking
Yeah.
opportunity. And I'm
Yeah,
still in
beautiful
touch with
people there.
some of the people that I was in
Yeah.
the group with, and also the practices and the guidance and the mentoring that you gave was great. So
Oh,
I loved it.
yeah, good. I'm so glad.
It was
It's so nice to
helpful.
hear that. Yeah, and I think there's something too that as yoga teachers, it's kind of a lonely road. Like
It
you're
is.
building a business and you're not necessarily like a business person. I mean, and you even had experience because you had already built a business as an architect
Hmm.
in a different language than English, in Norwegian and English, which
Hmm.
is incredible.
I have to remind myself of that at times.
Yeah, no. So you had like a whole history of business experience, but I think like with myself and maybe you can relate that when you built your business, it was just sort of like more out of necessity and out of sort of like responding to whatever needs you were seeing. And there wasn't like
Yeah,
the intentional, conscious sort of thought put into what you're offering, who are you offering it to, what, like being really specific about some of those things.
definitely. And also, as I got that from Marie Forleo, a multi-passionate
Yeah.
entrepreneur, right? And I
Right.
loved it. I love it because
Yeah.
it's so true. I feel like, but I also learned in B school that one thing at a time.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
We have to focus at the same time that we have other, like, we have to focus on what we're doing at that one offering, one
Yeah.
thing at a time,
Yeah.
which
Harmony,
is like
what's
kind of like yoga too.
Yeah, it is. I know. I think the yoga sets us up really well. And then we just have to add in like the business components.
yeah,
Yeah,
because it is a
definitely.
business.
It is
Yeah.
a business.
You're a single purveyor. I remember Harmony asked me once about who my
Ideal client
ideal
was.
avatar,
Ideal client avatar.
ACA,
ICA.
ICA was, and I said, well, it's late middle aged art professors, and she said, do they buy paintings from you? I said, no, of course not. It's like, oh, then my ICA is wrong, and my whole way
Well,
of
no, your
working.
ICA could be right, but then you need to somehow figure out what kind of paintings they
No, they
buy.
don't buy
Yeah,
paintings.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
They don't buy
Yeah.
paintings.
So the paintings aren't right. And then fundamentally, I'm in a crisis now.
But change the ICA.
Yeah, that's
the
what I said.
But if I turn Harmony's mom into my ICA, then I got to make paintings that suit her, and then everything changes. Everything's wrong at that point. So I got to figure that part out.
Yeah, you're still working on that. It's been a few years.
Yeah.
It's not easy to figure that
No,
out. It takes a
no.
lot of trial and
Yeah.
error, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also for each offering, you can have a different ideal client
Yeah.
or a different ideal client avatar. Like,
And you might have like
yeah.
profound emotional reactions to these choices that are,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, me spiral into crisis as I am.
And I think
But
also as you grow, your business changes too, and what you want to
yeah.
focus on also changes. And so then you kind of have to redo a lot of the work that maybe you did before, which again is kind of like our yoga practice where you have to kind of keep getting up and going over the same ground again and again and again. And each time it's a little different. It's
Mhm.
changing,
Hmm.
evolving. Yeah. Yeah.
It's evolving. Yeah.
And so as you're evolving, that was a good lead segue.
Is it? What are you segueing to?
Well, what's next for you? You have your yoga school where I think you're still teaching classes, and do you still have your teacher training program that you are doing?
I do. I have my yoga school. I did, we had, let's see, in 2021, 22, I graduated 6 students because the idea with the yoga school was that, from my personal experience, that I've always traveled to gain experience, and I thought it would make it easier and also safer to to create community, to take trainings where you are, and create community. So that's the basis for why I started the yoga school. And then I have I don't have a teacher training coming up and right now this fall, but perhaps I've had a couple people that are interested. But I have a program because I also have a certificate as a menopause yoga teacher.
Amazing.
So you're like 20. What the? That's
we already
early.
Established this.
That's really early. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's kind of you, Russell. I think it's the backlighting.
Maybe it is, but in North Dakota they have children young.
Yeah, not that young.
Not that young.
And so you have is it an intensive that you're doing, or a course or
an
program?
immersion? It's an immersion called Awaken, which is, I just came back recently from a trip in Italy where I held a retreat with a friend of mine who has a small Italian travel agency. So her and I took a group of women to the Adriatic coast in Italy. And it was the whole idea was to create light and fun and joy in your life. And so we had so much fun, and I just came back feeling inspired. And I think we need to have more joy in our lives, and do things that feel light and joyful. And so my ideal client is women in menopause.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of us.
And just using my integration process through menopause, tools of yoga and journaling and meditation, to create more of a lightness, a lighter vibration, so that we can. Menopause is always talked about as being so heavy and and I think that if we change the way we think about it as kind of an awakening or a second spring, then we can feel better about it as women going through it. So that's why I wanted to do this immersion. And I'm still in the process of working on that. And then I'm going to be offering a spiritual emergence peer support group in September.
Beautiful.
Online. Where people, but it will be donation based. And so I don't have all of the information out yet on my website. I'm updating my website, but as a way to help others and give back and take the stigma away from it. A lot of people feel alone, and a lot of times it's pathologized, and it doesn't have to be. So, yeah.
Your website is yogasusan.com, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So everyone can go there and find the spiritual emergence peer support.
The Awaken sounds really nice.
And Awaken as well.
I'd like to do that.
Perimenopause can last for 10 years or longer, so
I know.
You could keep offering this intensive we can keep coming back to it again and again.
It says the waiting list is for 12 women. What is it for men? How many?
There's no men
how many
in
spots?
the list.
What? How many? No, seriously. How many spots for men?
When you get a uterus, you can join.
When you start having babies.
Well, I'm gonna fucking Google that then, and I'll get back to you.
Okay. I'm sure there's some augmentation you can do if you want.
Yeah.
Oh my!
Wow. Well, this podcast was brought to us today by Vossevangen, and Vossal is a type of Norwegian farmhouse ale. And so I hope that when you're having your awakening in Norway with Susan, that you enjoy Vossal and have. I think it's actually, I don't think it's I think Vossevangen is the town and Vossal is the actual beer.
Yeah.
So we may have to send that money back. But this has been, I really appreciate the time that you spent with us. It's been really lovely.
It was so nice to connect with you. And thank you for sharing your story with us and all of your insights and wisdom. And I'm sure it will help others too, which is really important because I think, like you said, people feel alone, and also it does get pathologized, and it doesn't have to be something that feels scary, or maybe also people are just feeling like, I don't know, something's happening and I don't know what it is. And that is also a good person to look you up and have a chat with.
Yeah.
Find resources.
Yeah. I just thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Good. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Finding Harmony with me, your host, Harmony Slater. You can find out more information on my website, harmonyslater.com, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Standing in eternity's shadow, watching the breaking waves. There's a hard wind and the soil